Edward Snowden is dropping big bombshells on the elite with new information, insight. This is incredible new information. Listen.
This new wave of whistleblowers, the Thomas Drakes, the Bill Binnies, the Kirk Wiebes, the Ed Loomises, even the John Kiriakis, the Chelsea Mannings, if it had not been for them and their examples, I might have replicated their mistakes. Thomas Drake, for going through these proper channels, was hounded by the U.S. government. He was charged under the Espionage Act, the same laws they accused me of violating. This is a law that does not provide a fair trial. You are literally prohibited by law from presenting your defense to the jury. You can't tell them why you did what you did and have them decide if that was basically a relevant enough threat to the operation of the system that your acts made sense. The same way that in the United States, even a murderer can say, look, this person was threatening my life, and the jury can consider maybe this was self-defense, is denied to whistleblowers in the United States who reveal information to journalists. Under US law, it doesn't matter. These men did it anyway. They did everything right. They even went to Congress. Going to journalists was an act of last resort. And for that, the US government destroyed their lives. None of them continued in their career. Many of their pensions were threatened. Thomas Drake was charged with multiple felonies. Bill Binney was pulled out of the shower at gunpoint. Chelsea Manning is currently serving 35 years in prison in the United States. And I say, if it had not been for these individuals, what I did, my own actions, and the public benefits that have derived from them would not have been possible. I have tried to act in absolutely the most responsible way, an overly responsible way, to establish that the government will respond the same, the government will retaliate the same, regardless of how careful the whistleblower is. Whether an individual in the United States goes to WikiLeaks or they publish these things directly unredacted on the internet themselves, or whether they work as I did, where you have a system of checks and balances where journalists have the material, they make the publication decisions, not myself. And then they even give the government a chance in advance of publication to review the stories and go, hey, maybe you guys don't understand the details here. Maybe you don't see the big picture here. Maybe there's one little sentence here that you don't quite get. We'll put a human life at risk here. And because of this, we'd like to share this evidence with you that that is in fact the case, and for you to consider whether or not you want to modify your story as a result. And that has been followed in every case in the reporting that has arisen from me. But despite that, the US government makes no distinction whatsoever. And I think this is an important thing to establish because it means the government's not actually concerned with harm mitigation. They're not actually concerned with saving lives, with protecting programs, or ensuring that human sources or the efficacy of our security apparatus continues unimpeded. Maybe it's just about changing the subject. Maybe the government would rather talk about the theoretical risks of journalism when you're in an open society with a free press, where mistakes could possibly be made. Someone could possibly be hurt, although it's never happened. Not in national security reporting, not in the way we've seen. We have no public evidence, not in my case, not in Manning's case, not in any other case that we can think of, not Ellsberg, not Binney, not Drake. If this is the case, they don't want to talk about they do want to talk about the theoretical risks of journalism instead of the concrete harms of their policies, of their programs, of the decisions, the way this is affecting everyone in the United States and around the world. They don't want to have a conversation about what's been done. They want to have a conversation about what might happen if you don't trust them. What might happen if journalists investigate them in the absolute worst case? And I say, ladies and gentlemen, the absolute worst case that could happen is that we don't ask those questions, is that we do simply trust the government, because we have evidence that when we do that, things go wrong. You asked generally about what kind of programs were happening, not just in Germany, but around the world. This is the one that everyone's familiar with, the PRISM timeline. PRISM is a particular collection program under a specific authority in the United States. This is a little bit legalistic, but it's called Section 702 of the FISA Amendments Act. This was passed in 2008 as a revision of the Protect America Act of 2007. And this was when the U.S. internet service providers, the one that everybody relies on around the world, started going beyond what the law required to cooperate with the government and give them access to people's data without warrants. Now, the U.S. government will go, no, this isn't true, this isn't true. And in a very narrow sense, they have an argument about American citizens. If you're a U.S. citizen, they have to get a warrant before they can force these providers to give this information to them. The providers can still voluntarily give it to them. And this is, in fact, a business model for places like AT&T. AT&T will give your information to the government. AT&T is one of the largest telecommunications providers in the United States. They'll give this information to the government as long as they pay for it, even without a warrant. They'll use lower standards of requests like subpoenas. But it's not just PRISM. There's also what's called the upstream collection program. Now, this happens both under that same authority, Section 702 of the FISA Amendments Act, that's the FAA 702 at the top. This is the transatlantic internet cables and the ones that are happening under the ground. This was happening not only in the United States at every sort of border exchange point, every major internet exchange point in the United States, but all of these things get back to something quite simple here, which is the idea that governments don't like to ask permission. Governments don't like to follow procedures. Governments don't like to be bound by the same laws that you and I are. When they draft these laws, they create exceptions. When there aren't enough exceptions, they make their own. And as long as they have this shield of the state secrets privilege, this sort of shade of secrecy that they can cover their actions with, by the time we the people, by the time journalists, by the time the public learns about them, the officials who are most responsible for these violations of our rights are often out of office. And this is why, the only reason this kind of paradigm can continue is because we don't punish officials who do this, even in the most egregious cases. Yes, Barack Obama authorized the warrantless wiretapping of everyone in the world in the United States. Americans, he collected their communications, unconstitutionally seized them, which is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. The courts ruled that his programs of mass surveillance related to telephony metadata had not only been unlawful from the time they were authorized more than 10 years before, but were likely unconstitutional, and they described them as Orwellian in their scope. But that's surveillance, right? You might go, all right, it's terrible as that is, he's just spying on everyone. And when we have this two-tiered system of justice, where when you're a whistleblower and you go to the number 2 lawyer in the NSA and you go, hey, these new programs might be violating the law, they might be violating the Constitution, he tells you to get lost. He puts the Department of Justice on you. You get investigated. You lose your job, you lose your house, you lose your wife, you lose your freedom because you go to jail, you get arrested.
Paul Barrett is back with his third album, Third Phase of Moon, The Strangest Things. 12 brand new tracks heard by millions on your favorite channel, Third Phase of Moon. Available on iTunes, Amazon, and music streaming services. Paul Barrett's Third Phase of Moon, The Strangest Things. Available right now. Links are below.